So nice to meet both of you.
You too, Abe.
Thank you.
Can you tell me about your history with Wicked?
I heard about this book called Wicked in a very random way. I was on a trip with a friend, and she's happened to say, "Oh, I'm reading this really interesting book called Wicked, and it's the Oz story from the Wicked Witch's point of view." So I thought that was a genius idea and could be a really wonderful musical. And so I found out that Universal was making it into a non-musical movie, and I talked to Winnie about the book, and it turned out you can tell your part of the story. You knew the book too, but hadn't read it.
I had never read the book, and I'd purchased the book, and it was sitting on my shelf, staring at me, literally. And then when Stephen said, I think it should be a musical, my mind was blown. I thought, oh my God, that's so true. What a great idea. And then Stephen managed to convince Mark Platt, who was then the head of the studio of Universal, to stop developing it as a non-musical movie and instead to let us
do a musical show.
Yeah. So that's how it started.
That's how it started. And then once the show turned out to be successful, because Universal is a movie company, we knew that someday it would be a movie. So for about 20 years, Winnie and I have been talking about, well, when we do the movie, why don't we try this? And maybe that should be in the movie.
Yeah.
So it's been a while in development.
It was a long gestation process, but it was good because it was plenty of time for us to explore different ideas, some of which were dead ends, some of which are in the movies, and just to really let our imaginations go, so that we kind of let go of what we wanted to be loyal to our musical, to our stage musical, but at the same time be creative. And John Chu, when we started to collaborate with him, he had so many exciting ideas that took it to another level. So we were ready at that point to kind of, trust him and go, yeah, let's really adapt it. Let's make it our story, but cinematic.
And obviously this part one is longer than the first act of the show. At what point did you know that this had to be a two-part cinematic experience?
Well, you've sort of answered the question. As we were working on telling the story, turning it into a movie, what do we want to see in a movie? What can we do in a movie that we could not do on stage? What are parts of the story we wish we could have told? It was longer. And so it sort of revealed itself that if we could do two movies, then we could really explore it as much as we wish to do.
And we wouldn't have to cut any songs. That was a big priority for us. We felt that the fans would not like that, and we this was our moment to make the movie that would really make us happy, and we didn't want to cut any of the score. So, and in fact, Stephen wanted to add some songs for the second part of the story. So this was really the answer.
How did you balance, wanting to service fans' expectations and make sure they weren't disappointed, and also take some creative leaps and change certain things?
I think we just had to use our own instincts.
Yeah, we tried to make sure that any changes were, as Mark Platt put it, additive. That we were never just changing things for its own sake or throwing stuff in that didn't need to be there. And our hope was that if it seemed necessary to the storytelling to us, then fans who knew every line of the show by heart would understand why we made the changes, additions, subtractions that we did, and feel supportive of that.
How much did you turn back to the book for things that didn't make it to the stage musical?
Not at all.
We didn't.
Okay.
We were really working from our musical. We wanted it to be a retelling, a new telling of our musical. And John Chu had so many exciting ideas. We really didn't need to go back to the book because we had, the book was kind of from another time in our lives.
Well, also, when we were working on the show through the generosity of Gregory Maguire, who wrote the novel, he gave us full permission to use from his book and the story that he had created what worked for us, and not to have to use the stuff that didn't, and we could make up our own things. So the musical really became its own animal, for want of a better word. And therefore, when we were thinking of making a movie, that's what we were working from. It wasn't like, oh, you know what, we need to fill some time. Let's go back and see if there's a chapter in the book we can take something from and stick into our story. That really was not part of the process.
What kind of challenges did you encounter in terms of building a cinematic world that you wouldn't have expected from the stage?
Well, just talking musically for a moment, and then Winnie, I know, has things to say about the story. But, you know, there are things that will work in a musical on stage that are just not going to work in a movie. A character can stand by herself in the middle of the stage, hit her with 3 spotlights, let her sing a big song for 4 minutes, never moving. That's going to be a very exciting moment. Can't do that in a movie. So some of the challenges were, how do we take these sung moments from the show and realize them on film without it making it look like we just desperately did things to open them out. And there again, as Winnie's been doing through this discussion, I give a lot of credit to John Chu for how he reimagined what were basically stage numbers. I mean, it's one thing if you're doing Defying Gravity and she's flying. Of course, you can do that better in a movie than you can on stage. But some of the other things were really required great cinematic imagination that I think John brought to it.
Well, part of our plot, involves the animals of Oz being persecuted and silenced, literally until they are no longer able to speak. And we suggest that on stage with one animal. We have this incredible goat professor who's a wonderful character, and that is a character that we did take from Gregory's novel. But we knew immediately that when we first started talking about a movie, that we were going to have to do more, that we were going to have to show what was happening to the animals in different ways without creating a lot of new animal characters, because we wanted maybe one new animal character, but we didn't want a whole menagerie because we didn't have time, because let's face it, our focus is Glinda and Elphaba. That is our focus. That is the heart of the show, and our other characters that come into their lives. So that's an example of we just knew that to show the world of Oz, to show what was happening in the world of Oz, we were going to have to find other ways to demonstrate the animal's plight.
Were you involved in the casting process at all, and did that affect anything in terms of your work?
Yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about this particular experience is how collaborative our generous director allowed us to be. I think from what I've heard, a lot of times if you sell your show to the movies, they say, thank you very much, we'll invite you to opening, go away. But in this case, I mean, obviously Winnie was writing the screenplay, I was writing a couple of new songs, and I was producing the music, so we were going to be involved in that way, but we really found ourselves very much included in the whole process, for which we're obviously very grateful. And part of that was the casting. I mean, look, in the end, it's going to be the director's choice, but he consulted with us every inch of the way, and there was really never one moment where he said, well, it's too bad what you think, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And
we had so much agreement. I mean, with those two incredible artists, Cynthia and Ariana, I think we just all saw it. And we all saw it at the same time, I think. We just saw that those were the two women that were going to be wonderful in these parts. So it's not like we were part of it, but we were all wonderfully on the same page a lot of the time.
Yeah, but I think that was, as I said, that was true the entire casting process. which I think, as I said, is kind of unusual maybe with movies.
Yeah, it went fairly really smoothly, I would say, and I think you can see it in the movie in the movies that these are people who are really really right for these parts.
Would you say you took a very similar approach to part two, or you think audiences will be prepared for what they're going to experience there if they've seen other things, or are we in for something very different?
Well, it's certainly a continuation of the story. It's, I think tonally there are some different things. Now, I'm saying this when part two is still in creation. We're just really getting into it now. So it will become what it's going to become organically the way part one did. I mean, it was all shot at the same time. So, it's basically two halves of one story, but there is definitely a bit of a tonal difference.
I think it's also exciting because there are people who, as you've said, have been, like both of you, involved in this for 20 years, may have even come from the book. And then there are people who don't go to the theater, who love movies and
Yes.
or love Ariana Grande, and this is it. And they're coming to this for the first time. What expectations do you think they should have, and how do you think they'll react to it?
Well, we hope that you can walk in and not know anything about it, maybe don't even like musicals, and get carried away by this particular story, these amazing performances that Winnie has referred to of these two women and the rest of the cast, and John Chu's just glorious cinematic vision. Obviously, the more you bring to it, if you know the 1939 movie, I think that enhances it. If you know the show, I think it makes this experience interesting in a different way. But obviously, we want something that will speak to an audience that's just coming in for the first time and knows nothing.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you both luck. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.